All right, Wolfpack. We're going now to the running backs with the best and worst schedules moving forward. And the easiest running back schedule, Austin Ekeler, the Chargers, and especially get soft in the playoffs. But starting this week against Green Bay, a top 10 matchup for backs. Baltimore in week 12, not the best for Austin Ekeler. But after that, not a single bottom half matchup. New England's top half. Then you get Denver twice on this schedule. Denver, most points allowed to backs. The Raiders, fourth most points allowed to backs to kick off your playoffs. Buffalo, really susceptible against the run. And then you get Denver again, first most points again allowed to backs. Ekeler is in a position to smash. Now, I understand he's not going to be cheap. It's Austin Ekeler. But we're talking about maybe you can move a Tyreek Hill, the worst playoff schedule, the worst rest of season schedule among wide receivers, to go get this guy who's been Austin Ekeler, sure, solid, 20-ish points since he returned these past couple of weeks. But he hasn't really been Austin Ekeler, those 30-point, 3-touchdown monsters. They're coming, and they're going to come when it matters most. So Ekeler, a must-buy. The Patriots have the second easiest schedule, and they have a Week 11 bye, so maybe if you don't need that win now, I still am skeptical. I think this offense is so horrendous, and we know that Zeke and Ramondre are kind of nibbling at each other's cheese, but they don't have a single red matchup the rest of the year. Every single matchup is in the top half of the league. The toughest one being the Chiefs in Week 15, but they get Denver the first. New York Giants, fresh out of the bye, fifth most, easy to smash. Pittsburgh, seventh most points allowed to backs as well. And then Buffalo, as we talked about, a top 10 matchup for backs in the fantasy playoffs. So there is some upside here to maybe buy Ramondre. I don't buy it, though. And I personally might use this schedule to try to sell Ramondre. Hey, look at how juicy his schedule is. And if you need to win, go get Ramondre. I don't really buy, despite the fact that Ramondre's coming off his best 2 games of the year. I'm not buying this full turnaround. And then this could be a nice chip to use to sell. Third easiest matchups, third best schedule for running backs, Derrick Henry. We know King December Henry is just looming and waiting to smash opponents into the ground. And boy, will he have the schedule, especially in your playoffs, to do so. Jacksonville this week, tough. So if your trade deadline extends, I know a lot of them are this Saturday, Yahoo especially. Go check your trade deadline, first of all. That's kind of why we're doing this show right now. Go double check that. But if you can maybe wait it out, you'll probably get stifled against Jacksonville. Really good run D, the definition of a pass funnel. After that, Carolina, second most points. Indy, fifth most points. Miami, 18th most. Then you get Houston twice in your fantasy playoffs, ninth most points allowed to backs. Sandwiched between a game with Seattle, who's been getting bludgeoned these past 3 weeks in the top 5 in points allowed to backs. I know it too. Henry has been stinking. That is also why you could probably get him for real cheap. Some of the deals I'm seeing Henry get moved for are ridiculous. It's worth the chance that maybe, just maybe, Henry's got one final crazy set stretch run. He's got the schedule to do it. We've seen it time and time again. That's a bet I'm willing to make, especially if I can buy it as cheap as I'm seeing him go for, like wide receiver 2s. And I get it. And maybe he doesn't come to fruition. Maybe he just stinks now. Maybe he will just keep getting game flowed out of games. There is that risk with Henry. That's why he's going for Deebo Samuel, such type of trades as that. I will buy into the third best schedule, a guy that we've seen down stretch runs consistently bludgeon opponents. I like Derrick Henry there. Continuing on, the Texans actually have the fourth best schedule, and they are one of the best win nows. Devin Singletary, don't think he's going to cost you a ton to get. You could certainly, I bet a lot of his owners are skeptical. 30 carries last week. Is he really going to do that? Is Dameon Pierce going to come back? Some narratives to plant because he gets Arizona, third most points. Jacksonville, not easy. We talked about that. But then Denver and New York, both of them top 10, in particular Denver, again, the most points allowed. Does get a little bit stiffer in the fantasy playoffs there in weeks 15, 16, and 17. Tennessee, bottom 20 matchup, and then Cleveland, bottom 3 matchup. So the playoffs aren't going to be great for Devin Singletary. But if you need that push right now, we know he's going to get the workload. I don't even worry at all about Dameon Pierce coming back. If you can buy Devin Singletary on the cheap, he gets a schedule. The next best schedule, and this one's actually beautiful the rest of the way. I'm surprised this isn't ranked even higher by FF Toolbox. That's the Browns. It is absolutely golden. In 5 of the next 7 matchups, they face a top 10. It's top 10 for them. They get a generous defense in 5 of their 7 matchups, but a single red zone matchup here where you have to really worry about it. You got New England coming up, 7th most points. Or no, rather Pittsburgh, 7th most points. Then you get Denver. We keep saying Denver. The most points allowed to running backs in week 12. So if you need a win right now, Jerome Ford, who's had 60% of the snaps, 60% of the rushes in back-to-back weeks, really taking over that full workhorse role. I get it. Kareem Hunt, he's going to continue to be a bit annoying here, but he's going to continue to vulture. You got to live with it. He's still Jerome Ford, scored 12 and 13 points, been a top 20 running back in back-to-back weeks, and nobody seems to love him. Plus, you got Deshaun Watson now out, so there's a lot of narratives, a lot of holes you can poke to try to sneak him away for cheaper. Fantasy playoffs, Chicago, Houston, and New York Jets, all top 10 matchups for running backs, all green, lighted up type matchups. Now, rounding out some running backs, though, the Vikings have the 6th best schedule. The Bucks have the 7th. Rachaad White, top 12 running back for 3 straight weeks. Maybe you sneak in on him. The Raiders also have the 8th, and we know Antonio Pierce is trying to craft this offense around Josh Jacobs. We'll talk about their playoffs and how it's a little soft, too, momentarily. The Chiefs and Isaiah Pacheco, after they get Philly, the worst matchup for running backs this week. It's all green from there. So Pacheco could be intriguing. And then the Steelers guys, also very intriguing as well. Jaylen Warren, the new potential starter there. Now, in terms of running backs with the worst rest of season schedule, you can consider selling. The single worst one right now is Chuba Hubbard and the Panthers. Now, I don't know what you're going to get for Chuba Hubbard. This is kind of your, you can go ahead and cut him. Now, maybe you can package Chuba in a wide receiver and steal Antonio Brown off a bad game against the last week against Cleveland. Could be a nice spot to go and target him. Saquon and the Giants, though, might be even more appetizing as a trade bait. If you have Saquon, they have the 2nd hardest schedule. With Tommy DeVito, we know it's going to be a train wreck, but maybe you can squeeze some value out of the name alone of Saquon Barkley. 3 bottom 6 matchups. Dallas already out of the way, but then you got Washington, New England, middle of the road, bye week. That doesn't help anybody. Green Bay is a juicy one in week 14, but then the fantasy playoffs come. New Orleans 28th, Philly 32nd, as we just talked about, and the Rams 22nd. Not a great matchup either. Not a single juicy matchup here for Saquon. The best is going to come this week against Washington. If your trade deadline extends a week and maybe you can move him if he has a good one, that wouldn't be so bad. Now, a guy that's also intriguing asset right now, Alvin Kamara, top 3 running back since he returned, certainly in PPR leagues as well. So we're not saying sell him. Want to keep emphasizing sell high. Alvin Kamara, don't sell him unless you can get an absolute haul. Maybe this is your way to go get CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, one of those stud wide receivers that actually have a nice juicy track on the rest of season schedule. We'll dive into those guys in a little bit. But Kamara gets his bye this week, and then Atlanta actually been 27th in points allowed. Not great. Detroit, 30th in points allowed to running backs. Really sick matchup. Then 14th, he does get week 14, Carolina, the best you could possibly ask for. And even in week 15, to kick off your playoffs, the Giants, that looks good too. But then it gets ugly again. The Rams, 22nd, Tampa Bay, 31st. Not the best schedule here for Alvin Kamara. I get how much of a hog he's been and what a beast usage-wise. Expected fantasy points through the roof and real-life fantasy points not that. But don't forget, too, he also got out-carried by Taysom Hill just a week ago. This offense continues to find ways to feed everyone else other than him at the goal line, it seems. So I would see what I could get for Alvin Kamara right now, despite him being so good. The Bears do have the 3rd hardest schedule among running backs. 4 of their next, or actually 5 of the remaining 6 games are red. That's bad. And then you got the fact that Justin Fields is coming back, adding a quote-unquote another running back to the mix. Khalil Herbert's due back because it's going to become a 4-headed nightmare between Herbert, Foreman, maybe Roschon stays involved. Certainly Justin Fields, you're going to vulture people. So I don't think you're going to be able to trade them for anything. This is more so, you can probably cut Donta Foreman at this point. Khalil Herbert, probably not worth rostering. It's going to be an ugly nightmare with an even uglier schedule down the stretch. And then this one, though, you might be able to capitalize. Just ripped off a 64-yard touchdown. Ken Walker, running back 6 in fantasy right now. Oh, man, you got to go get on this action, right? The Rams, 22nd, and that's actually the best matchup he faces for 5 weeks after that. San Fran, 24th. Dallas, 23rd. San Fran, again, 24th. Philly, 32nd in your fantasy kickoff right there for the playoffs. Tennessee, 20th. And then, he does get a nice, juicy matchup against Pittsburgh in week 17. But after that gauntlet, with all these injury concerns kind of piling up, I think Ken Walker is the ultimate running back sell right now with an ugly slate of matchups. Now, looking ahead to your fantasy playoffs, guys, the easiest matchup for your fantasy running backs, the Las Vegas Raiders. Josh Jacobs, baby. We talked about, again, how they're making him the centerpiece of this offense under Antonio Pierce. He gets the best running back schedule in terms of adjusted fantasy points and regular fantasy points there. Getting the Chargers, solid matchup. The Chiefs, not great, but then Indy, 5th most points allowed to the backs. The only team that actually has a better schedule than him, Austin Ekeler himself, the team they're facing there, the most points allowed both regular season and schedule adjusted against the Raiders, 21.6 schedule adjusted points. Buffalo, 17.9, as we talked about, a weaker run D compared to the past. And then Denver, as we continue to allude to, the number one matchup you can ask for in your fantasy championships for Austin Ekeler. This is why I would give up, again, a Tyreek Hill, whatever you really have to do. Jamar Chase, go get Austin Ekeler however you can. All the rest of the way, it's juicy, but then the fantasy playoffs get even juicier. And right under those guys, a running back we haven't talked about yet, DeAndre Swift has the third easiest. Now, week 15, not great for DeAndre Swift. Seattle, it's an okay matchup, but then you get the Giants and Arizona, two bottom five matchups against the run there. So great spot for DeAndre Swift, especially if you're in that. I probably have a week 15 bye. I just need 16 and 17. He's going to be a top 6 running back for back-to-back weeks when you need him most. So I really like DeAndre Swift. The Pats have the 5th best adjusted points in your fantasy playoffs. Again, I still don't know that I love buying this, but then Jerome Ford comes in with the 6th best schedule. The only other guy, and actually I haven't mentioned him, and in terms of schedule adjusted points for your fantasy playoffs, second best, Bijan Robinson, coming off his career high 22 carries, finally getting into the end zone again, getting used by Arthur Smith as the feature back that he should. So a really good spot for Bijan Robinson in your fantasy playoffs. He gets Carolina, 2nd most points allowed, Indianapolis, 5th most points allowed, Chicago, 7th most points allowed. So actually it goes Austin Ekeler, then it goes Bijan Robinson, and then Josh Jacobs as the 3 top buys. And I get it that it might have been a week too late on Bijan, given that he just had his best game since the week 4 of the season. You could have probably got him a significantly amount cheaper just 2 weeks ago when everything was all, what the hell's up with Bijan Robinson? Arthur Smith's the biggest villain in the world. And he still is. He still sucks. And there is a risk that you could trade for Bijan and then you see him just play second fiddle to Tyler Algiers with this juicy schedule. That's certainly a possibility. But right now, this is as good as it gets for your fantasy playoffs. Bijan, and he has a top just overall rest of season schedule. It does end up falling right outside the top 12, right there at number 12. But the fantasy playoffs is what really makes that juicy. So the next couple of weeks, if you're win now mode, not the best for Bijan, but fantasy playoffs, it could be a doozy. What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments, check out some more videos, and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.